My name is David Kowalski. And if you're hearing this, it means I'm not completely burned out after all. Maybe some part of me is still there. Or maybe you're the one who needs to hear. I'm not a mystic, I'm not a prophet. All my life, I worked in the engineering department of the city administration. My mind is precise, earthy, based on numbers, calculations, and concrete. I never believed in miracles. Them. He respected it like old fairy tales, like the stories of grandmothers whispering prayers in the dark, but he didn't accept it. Until that day. It happened on Highway 128, between Keelek and Rodham. I was on my way home from my cousin's funeral. It was hot. It was unnaturally hot, as if it wasn't the sun, but the giant pupil of a god that was looking directly at the ground without blinking. The air vibrated. I held the steering wheel like a lifeline, but it still felt like something was slowly, but surely pulling me away from reality. I don't remember the exact moment of impact. I remember the sound. Not an explosion, not a roar, but as if the world was being sucked in, like a breath before sinking. And then, silence. But not the same as after a loud sound. It was a different kind of silence. I couldn't tell if I was asleep, dead, or just passed out. The space I find myself in is indescribable. There were no walls, no floor, no sky. Only a gray gloom, in which nothing was reflected, but everything was felt. It's as if the feelings are still there, but the body is gone. In this place, if you can call it a place, there was no time. I didn't realize it right away, but I did. Nothing happened there. But this, nothing, was blindingly palpable. Like a shadow cast before the light appears. I didn't know how long I spent there. Perhaps for a moment. Maybe forever. And that's when I noticed him. The figure sat in the distance, or nearby. The perspective didn't work as well as it should. He was dressed in a simple, black robe. Her face was hidden by a hood. But I could feel him looking at me. Not with the eyes, but with something more ancient than the gaze. He didn't move. Only present. And his presence, it wasn't threatening. It warned me. I tried to speak, but my tongue wouldn't work. And then, for the first and last time, the man, the priest, or whatever it was that was wearing his form, stood up. As he rose, the space seemed to grow denser, closer. It was as if his growth was not only physical, but also ontological. He was getting bigger and bigger in his being. And that's just me. He came up to me, and I knew I wasn't in hell. But not in heaven either. I'm in the moment between. Like a frozen drop in water, suspended between falling and being absorbed. He didn't say anything. He waited. And then, only then, I realized that the question here is not, "Are you alive?" but, "Why are you here?" And as I stood before him, I felt that I would soon know not only the answer, but also the price of that answer. Because what he was waiting for was no longer waiting for me. I do not know how long we stood facing each other. In that space, time wasn't exactly distorted. It was unnecessary. Like an extra organ atrophied over the centuries. Everything was happening simultaneously. Waiting, fear, awareness, silence. Or maybe nothing was happening at all, and I was just aware that I was being watched by something that didn't have a name. He finally spoke. His voice didn't come out. It came from inside. It was as if the thoughts inside me recognized themselves. "David, you shouldn't have come. But since you're here, you need to hear. I wanted to ask, where am I? Who is he? Am I still alive?" But inside this space, such questions were indecent, inappropriate, too human. He continued. "You were in between. Between the body and the dust. Between breath and ash. Still, you're not the first. Some people come here by accident. Others are brought in. Who are you being led by?" I wanted to ask, but he beat me to it. That's not for you to know. While. And then, quite matter-of-factly, as if it were a public event, he said, I was there when Pope Francis died. The world around him shrank. Not literally, but it felt like the walls that weren't there were pressed up against my back. He didn't die in his sleep, as they said. Not alone. Not in silence. He died in agony. Not from the pain of my body, but from what I saw. And before his soul left his flesh, he spoke words that only I could hear. I looked at him, a figure from which it was impossible to tear my attention away, just as it is impossible to look directly at the sun without getting burned. And you, David, must hear them too. But he didn't say them right away. He just stood there. And I suddenly realized that I was afraid. If I don't hear it, I'm afraid to understand it. Who are you? I gasped. My voice sounded like the crackle of a cathedral candle. He didn't answer right away. It seemed to measure my ability to accept. I was a priest. In Montevideo. Small church by the sea. I served there for more than 20 years. But I'm not in the archives. The Vatican doesn't have a record of my ordination. Not a single mention. It's like I never existed. He didn't say it with resentment. With an indifference that is more disturbing than anger. I was given a name when I came to faith. But now I don't have it. Name! This is a reference to the earth. And I am now abiding to the truth. He made a pause. Similar to what surgeons do before the last incision. David, you were not chosen as a prophet. And not as a saint. You're a witness. And your testimony will not save anyone. But without it, no one will understand what exactly happened. I didn't know how to react. Everything that was happening was too real to be a dream, and too unreal to be life. I closed my eyes. And at that moment, I heard a sound. Whisper. Multiple, as if hundreds of people were speaking at the same time, all using the same words. A word that wasn't in my language. In my mind. It was older than the sounds. I felt a thin crack appear in the corner of my mind. He came closer. It was then that I saw his face for the first time. And I regretted it. Because it was changing. It was the face of every priest I'd ever seen, and at the same time the face of someone no one else was supposed to see. A face without features. A face that only exists when you're not looking at it. Don't be afraid, he said. You'll be right back. But this is just the beginning. When you wake up, start looking. Not answers. Not the point. A record. The one. A secret one. Which the Vatican hid. Record the last words of Pope Francis. It's not online. Not in the archives. It's in people who have heard and gone mad. Find one. His name is Franz, Colorado. He's alive. While. I mean, where is he? How do I find it? But at that moment, the world jerked, as if I'd been pushed from the depths to the surface. I woke up in intensive care. All around the machines, a face mask, the noise of voices. I was saved. But I knew it wasn't a rescue. This was a return to continue. And I knew that I was now living on borrowed time, given not by God, but by something that stands between God and man. It's been 6 weeks since the accident. My body recovered faster than I expected, but my mind was different. I didn't feel at peace like I used to. Everything became too clear, the sounds, the smells, the people's eyes. It's as if the filter I've been used to since childhood has disappeared between me and reality. But most importantly, I remembered his featureless face. He remembered words that weren't words. And most importantly, the name, Franz, Colorado. The name haunted me. I Googled it, searched social networks, old church registers, forums where they discussed the Vatican, secret teachings, and Apocrypha. Almost nothing. Zero. Almost. I found one entry. in the archive of a Polish magazine of the 90s, which dealt with parascientific topics. There, in the section, People Whose Minds Were Burned Out by Something, Franz K. was mentioned, a former librarian who heard what you can't hear. No last name, no exact city, just a phrase. Since then, he has lived in a house where the silence rings as if it is not silence, but a call. I do not know what guided me. Curiosity? Fear? A sense of duty to something higher than duty? I took a vacation. I got on the train. Then the bus. The roads became more and more empty, the houses more dilapidated. Finally, I reached a small village in the south. It wasn't on any tourist maps. There were no hotels, and people looked at the stranger as if he were a winter sleeper. When I asked the local store about Franz, Colorado, the clerk slouched as if he'd been punched in the spine. "Ask Father Pavel," he said, without looking up. Only, carefully. The church stood on a hill. Small, unassuming, with a peeling cross, rooted to the ground like the root of an old tree. Father Pavel turned out to be a gray-haired, deep man. He wasn't surprised to hear Franz's name mentioned. "Why do you want to find him?" he asked. His voice sounded like the creaking of an old staircase. "Him? He knows what Pope Francis said," I said. "Or maybe he was one of the people who heard it." There was a long pause. He closed his eyes. Then, still not looking at me, he said, "If you reach the end, don't ask for salvation. Because the one who heard his whisper can't ask any more. Transmit only." He gave me the address. No mysticism, just an old wooden hut on the edge of the forest. I walked there. The path led through bare trees whose branches intertwined into what looked like old Slavonic runes. There was something heavy and wet in the air, as if the earth itself was not breathing, but waiting. As I approached Franz's house, it was clear that he knew I was coming. The door was ajar. No sound at all. No creaking, no wind. Only a ringing silence. The silence is so dense that it seemed to have mass. Every step I took sounded like a stone falling into a bottomless well. I went in. There is no light source inside. Just a candle on the table. It burned softly, as if it was afraid of itself. He was sitting against the wall. An old man, thin, with eyes that looked not at me, but through me. I didn't get a chance to say hello. He whispered, "You come from someone who doesn't have a name." I nodded. My mouth was dry as ash. He closed his eyes like a man accepting a sentence. And he said, "I heard. Yes. Not in a dream. Not in a dream." I was standing outside the ward door when he said that. I was then attached to the Archive Commission. I happened to be in the hospital. I was looking for documents, but I found something else. He looked up, and I swore there were no pupils in them. Only mirrors. His last words, they weren't in Latin, not in Italian, and not in the language of humans. I was trembling. He continued. They sounded like a call from inside matter. I didn't understand the meaning, but I understood the direction. He wasn't talking to us. He warned the one who sleeps under the throne of light. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was about to fall into the abyss that he was beginning to open up. It wasn't God. It was the one who looks at God. And if he wakes up, everything that we call existing will be erased, like a thought that the dreamer didn't like. Franz paused. I stood there. He didn't chase me. He didn't call. He just let me know. I'm a carrier now. No sense evidence. And this certificate has a form, but not the words. Symbol. There was a strange sign carved on the wall of his house. There are 3 circles inscribed one inside the other, and in the center is an eye that looks not outward, but inward. Franz whispered, "Find someone who draws this symbol on their windows. He's next. But know this, Only those who have already been there go further. After I left Colo's house, I didn't sleep for 3 days. It wasn't because he was afraid, but maybe that was part of it. I just couldn't. Sleep was no longer a familiar thing. It has become something dangerous, like the forbidden forest in a fairy tale, where something lives that you have already disturbed once. Every time I started to fall asleep, there was a hum. No sound. Reminder. It was as if the space in my head was beginning to shrink, and something older than language, older than faith, older than fear itself was showing through the crack. Franz said, "Find someone who draws this symbol on their windows." But how do you look for a sign that no one is talking about? A symbol that appears not in books, but in dreams? I started with the city forums. Like a madman, he searched for references to strange signs, drawings on the glass, unfamiliar symbols in the entrances. Most of the messages were nonsense teen graffiti hoaxes. But one post, almost unnoticeable, caught my eye. "My son has this dream again. The same symbol. He paints it on the glass every morning. We tried to take him to a psychologist, but he says, 'I can't help but draw. If I don't draw it, it will open its eye.'" The author was a woman named Maria Wisniewska, from the industrial city of Zabrze. I texted her right away. The response was received a day later. Short, almost scared. "Are you one of them? Did you hear it too?" We agreed to meet. Her apartment was on the 6th floor of a prefabricated house. The walls are covered with icons, as if they were supposed to hold something outside, or from the inside. She was pale as chalk. Her hands were shaking. There are traces of wax on my fingers. Apparently, candles were always lit here. I saw him at once a boy. He looked about 8 years old. But the eyes, they weren't from childhood. He was sitting by the window, running his finger along the glass. And I went cold, because there was the same symbol on the glass. 3 circles. The inner eye. But now it was ajar. I sat down next to the boy. He looked at me, without fear, only with fatigue. "He touched you too," he said. "You're rustling inside, aren't you?" I couldn't answer. He just nodded. "I do not know who he is. All I know is that if I stop drawing, he'll forget he's asleep. And if he forgets, he'll wake up." I could feel the memory rising up inside me. Not specific. A deep one. It's like I've always known that there's something breathing under the fabric of the world that we shouldn't be aware of. And it's not evil. This is older than evil. This is the creation's indifference to itself. "Did you see him?" I asked the boy. He nodded. "He's sitting in the void. It doesn't move. He thinks. If he finishes thinking, we'll be gone. Simple, it won't. It's like it never happened." I was trembling. Maria came up behind me and said softly, "He started seeing it the same night Dad died. He woke up and said, 'Mom, the light's broken. He's moving.' Every night since then." I looked at the symbol again. Now I knew it wasn't just an image. It's something alive. This is the key. A form that captures presence. The boy suddenly handed me a piece of paper. It has a sign on it. But there's something else nearby. Something I couldn't quite see. Because as soon as I tried to focus, my mind would start to slip and the words would lose their shape. "That's his name," the boy whispered. "The present. No one should say it out loud, even mentally." He came closer. And in a whisper, like a terrible prayer, he said, "It's written in 3 churches. One is in Rome. The second is in the desert. The third is underground, where the light has never been. Find one, and you'll understand why Dad said what he said." I left Zabrze at night. Not because he was afraid, but because the world began to change. Day and night are no longer clear. People's faces began to show something in common. It's like something's leaking out. Through dreams, through children, through symbols. No one can pronounce his name. Because to say it, you need to give yourself completely to it. And it accepts only those who have already been forgotten by the world. Franz Colo. Rome. I started with Rome. It makes sense, doesn't it? The capital of the Vatican. The city where the bones of the apostles rest, where the walls are soaked with centuries of prayers and treachery, light and bloody secrets. I arrived there without a clear plan, only with the boy's phrase. The name is written in 3 churches. How do I search for a name that doesn't exist in languages? I started visiting old temples. Not tourist ones. The ones that smell like musty water, where candles burn not for beauty, but for fear. I found a monk, Brother Gregorio. He was blind, but as he said, he could see more than he should. I told him everything. Almost all. He was silent for a long time. Then he got up and told me to follow him. We went down to the dungeon under the church of San Clemente, the one that stands on the site of the pagan temple. Under the marble, under the crosses and frescoes, another church. Caminaya Street. No windows. With a soot-covered ceiling. And on the wall almost imperceptibly, but clearly the same symbol. But now something new has been added. A word written as if someone tried to forget it while writing it. Phoenician, Gregorio said. Or what came before it? He told me not to say it. Don't read it out loud. Don't even try to interpret it. Just remember the image, because it's the first part of the name. Every church is not a building. This is the threshold. The first is the mind. The second is flesh. The third is a memory that didn't exist. Before I left, he gave me a strange object, a piece of coal encased in glass. When you get to the next one, draw a symbol on the ground. And wait. 2. The desert. 2 weeks later, I was in the Judean desert. I followed the coordinates I found in a 16th century manuscript in the Vatican Library. Whoever wrote it was an inquisitor, and he died in a frenzy. On one of the pages was an engraving, a church without an entrance, standing in the middle of the sand, in a place where no pilgrim had ever set foot. I got there in a rented car and walked the last kilometer until the sun was as flat as a coin. She was standing there, low, black with age, partially collapsed, but alive. I drew the symbol in the sand as the monk had instructed. Waited. The sand beneath his feet began to stir. A figure rose from the ground. Not a person. More like the form that fear took when absorbed by the stone. Without a face. In the mantle. It didn't speak, but I could hear its voice inside my bones. The second part of the name is the breath of death. What you call the disappearance of the flesh. And it sounds silent. You can't remember her. You can feel it. He ran a finger down my wrist, and I disappeared for a moment. Not physically. I was there, but I wasn't in me. When I came to, there was a mark on the sand in front of me that looked like a burnt scar. The second part of the name. Not a symbol. Feeling. I remembered it as a person remembers the taste of bitterness on the tongue even in a dream. 3. Underground, where the light has never been. That was the hardest part. Because neither the monks, nor the manuscripts, nor the legends knew about the third church. Only one hint, a letter from Father Pavel, which arrived and signed, with the return address crossed out in charcoal. You were already in it. You just didn't realize it was her. Metro station. The old one. Abandoned. Where you saw a man without a face. I went back to my city. The station was called Sloyan 4. It was closed back in the 90s, allegedly because of an accident. But I remembered, that was where I'd seen him the night of the accident. I snuck in at night, breaking locks, sneaking through the corridors. It was all the same as in the memory. Crumbling walls, rusty handrails, blackness in the tunnels. But now I knew it wasn't a ruin. It's an altar. There is a circle in the center of the station. And when I stood in it, the walls whispered. Not with your ears. Not in words. They remembered me. And I remembered them. The last part of the name was the sound that is born when someone gives up on themselves forever. You couldn't hear it. It could only be lived through. As I stood there, my name, my real name began to peel away from me like dead skin. I knew that if I said the whole name, I would disappear. But I also realized that this is what Pope Francis whispered in its entirety before he died. He remembered the name of the one who sleeps under the throne of light. And this awakened us. I came out of there different. Not enlightened. Not saved. And the carrier. The name was breathing inside me now. Not as knowledge, but as a threat. Because now I understood that everyone who bears that name becomes a lighthouse. And he is looking for light to come out of the dream. When you learn his name, you are no longer you. You are what knows his name. And the world will feel it. From Pope Francis' Forbidden Letter to Cardinal Borromeo, 2023. I started to lose myself. This is not a metaphor. It's quite literal. I forgot the smells I loved. The morning coffee tasted as neutral as rain. My mother's name evoked a sense of meaning, but not the meaning itself. My shadow on the wall sometimes moved a little differently than I did. The name wasn't just knowledge. It was an infection of being. I began to feel others who bore his name. Sometimes in the subway, I felt like someone nearby wasn't breathing, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't need to. They were looking at the floor. And they bore the same marks as I did, empty eyes, a rumble in their chest, a dream in which they do not sleep. Secret audience. On the fourth night after returning from the station, I got a call. The voice was distorted, as if it were speaking through water. He wants you to go to a Silesian monastery. The service will be at 3 in the morning. Come through the back gate. Don't tell anyone. I didn't ask who it was, because I already knew that it wasn't people calling. It's him through them. The monastery was old and dilapidated. Inside, it smelled of incense, iron, and wet paper, like an archive of oblivion. A priest with no face was waiting for me there. He was wearing a cassock, but instead of a face, there was only a shawl pulled tight like a tightly knotted sack. No holes. No sign of life. Just a steady breathing that didn't come from the mouth, but from the outside, as if from behind. I got down on my knees. Not out of respect, but because it was impossible to stand otherwise. He came over. He touched my forehead. And I saw a memory that wasn't there. A memory that isn't mine. Snow. Stone Hall. Pope Francis pale, trembling, sitting in a chair. In front of him are 3 men in black cassocks. They are silent. Only one holds a sealed scroll in his hands. Dad opens it. And when he reads, his eyes start crying blood. He doesn't scream. He's smiling like a child who's been told a scary story. It's here, he says. It's already inside me. Holy Father, we must stop reading. No, he says. We've been hiding it too long. If he wakes up, let him hear his name. And he says it. 3 parts. The first one is like a word. The second one is like a void. The third is like the silence between 2 deaths. The room shudders. The candles go out. One of the cardinals burns down without making a sound. Dad looks straight into the void and says, "We don't pray anymore. We remember. Return." I woke up on the floor of the monastery. 1. The priest was not there. Only a black mark on the wall silhouette, as if from an atomic explosion. And on the floor, a phrase written in ash. When the name is spoken a second time, the light becomes flesh. And then the sleeper will come out into the light to forget it again. Monks who are silent. After that, I started receiving emails, No address, no signature. Just a white envelope with a single Latin phrase inside. Every night a new one. They were from the Silent Order monks who knew a name but didn't pronounce it. Their job is to prevent others from saying it out loud a second time. They're watching me. I see them in the reflections. In empty halls. On videos I didn't make. But I know they're not enemies. They are sleep guards. They're not afraid of me. It's that he can choose me as a mouthpiece. And now I must decide. To remain silent and die, forgotten by all. Or say his name and rewrite reality. Because I feel that the whole world is trembling in anticipation of the second utterance. Do not ask who hung on the cross. Ask who you didn't dare kill. From Orbis Cricket's Prayer Book, page 9. I, a symbol without salvation. I found it in a crypt under an old cemetery, not far from Poznan. Another letter took me there. Concise, on charred parchment. Et crucem quaera, sed non corpus. Quia corpus sum non accipit carnem. For his body was not flesh. The crypt was closed to the public, but I was given the key and an envelope taped to the apartment door. Without a note. Inside, there was a silence that resounded. I walked past ruined tombstones and collapsed pillars until I came to a circular hall where a stone cross stood, but without the crucifixion. Empty. No nail marks. No suffering Savior. Only on the back of the base is an inscription etched from the inside out, as if the matter itself was trying to spew out the name. I do not know the alphabet, but I felt something inside me recoil, as if recognizing the sound without hearing it. I leaned against the cross, and at that moment the space changed. 2. The space that doesn't remember you. I was still in the crypt, but there was no light, and there was no smell. Only a presence that doesn't need proof. I saw mirrors. 3. They were standing in a circle, like in a theater. I went to the first one. There is only darkness in it. Not even my reflection. Simply refusing to accept the request. The second one showed the room I used to sleep in as a child. But I wasn't in it. Not on the bed, not in the corner, not in the reflection of the toy's eyes. The room without me. 3rd, it distorted everything. I was standing there, but with a face I didn't know. It was looking right at me and smiling. You won't die, it said, because you're not alive anymore. You are the echo of a name that will be spoken again. 3. The secret liturgy. When I came back, I had a pebble in my hand. Small as a seed. He smelled like blood and wax. On its surface is a miniature cross, engraved from the inside out, without a body, without the crucifixion. I put it on the table and locked the door. During the night, I woke up to an ashen light pouring out of the stone. It didn't light up the room, just the space inside me. And then I realized, the cross is not a place of suffering. This is the place where they couldn't keep him, because the body is the limit, and the name is without flesh. It wants a body. Mine? 4. A message from another circle. The next morning, I received a letter, but not a paper one. A bloodstain on the bathroom mirror. The letters were written on the inside of the glass, not the outside. In speculo nullius quaes et canon fuit. Now I knew for sure that mirrors didn't see what you were, but what you had become. And I became the outline of a name, burned into the fabric of reality. Question. We know who hung on the cross. But who was not allowed to see it? Who was rejected even by death and suffering? The one whose name can't be told. Not because it's scary. Because it will bring you back. It will delete it. Make it a reflection, not a creature. And now I'm facing the final. One part of the name is in my chest. One was in the ashes under her tongue. One is in a mirror that no longer reflects. He requires no altars, only attentive ears. He does not seek faith, but only one who dares to repeat it. The second time, and everything becomes the first again. From the Revelation of Saint Ossip the Mute. The last time I called myself by my first name. From the moment I heard his name, I became a shadow of my old memories. It burned like fire in my heart, but I didn't dare say it out loud. I keep it inside me every night, as if I don't want it to get out. On the 8th night, when the city was eerily silent, I received a final message. It was empty except for a fingerprint on the inside of the envelope and a barely discernible engraving. If you don't say it, it will say you. 2. A ritual that has no equal. I went up to the roof of the old library, where I collected everything I needed. A stone with a cross devoid of flesh. A mirror that no longer reflects. Cloth soaked with the remains of the ancient liturgy. And my true name, written on my skin, as the last proof of my existence. The night seemed convex, and the time was intermittent. I felt the world freeze around me, waiting for the second utterance that would change everything. Standing in the center of the circle, smeared not with chalk, but with oblivion, I began to say the words. 3. Name. The first sound is guttural, like a moan, devoid of the usual melody. There was a spark in the sky, and a strange silence settled in my gut, not terrible, but demanding submission. The second sound is not a sound at all, but a moment between heartbeats, when you feel your senses split, dissolve in the air filled with the smell of copper and dust. 3rd. It was not spoken aloud, but the world responded with a silent transformation. Everything seemed to respond to something beyond words. 4. Consequences. The stone melted in his hands, and the mirror turned into a portal leading to the unknown. Space itself has changed, becoming an echo of a world that has never existed the way it did before. I saw images of everyone who had dared to speak before me, and those who never showed up, but whose names left permanent scars on the fabric of reality. They didn't say a word, because now my mission was to keep them quiet. Not the end, but the beginning. I went out into the street a different person. My path is now defined by the very name I hear inside me. Every spoken word becomes a path that no one can erase. If you've read this to the end, know this. The story doesn't end here. It just opens up a new layer of reality. If you feel that the world around you is changing, if something ancient is awakening inside, allow yourself to be attentive to the signs. Stay tuned for new discoveries, because every new sound, every drop of oblivion can turn back time. Thank you for reading this story. If it resonates with you, please support our channel. Your support helps us continue to share the story that will never die. Thanks for attention. Timeless religious stories. Be attentive to the signs and take care of your dreams.